Hello everyone, I'm Karri Huhtanen and I'm here to talk to you about Wi-Fi roaming security and privacy. My background is so that I have started doing Wi-Fi things in 1997, I think, and continued doing them throughout my kind of whole work career. I have done some Linux, Unix stuff, internet stuff, even longer there, but that's not the kind of point of this presentation. I have also done things that you may have used in your universities, schools, like EduRoam since the beginning of EduRoam in 2002, 2003, both globally and here in Finland. And we are still continuing to do those things, for example, running the EduRoam top-level roaming service for CSE FUNET. And we have been doing that since 2004. If you want to know more about my background, well, you need to do some social engineering, so come to talk to me about stuff. But now I want to go to the actual kind of subject of the presentation. So first, a little bit of background about VPA2, VPA3 enterprise authentication, authorization, accounting, and roaming basics, because this is a kind of a bit different thing from Wi-Fi network security. It's part of it, but this is in this kind of scale that what, for example, EduRoam is. It's a kind of confederation or federation of different networks there, bound together with this kind of authentication infrastructure. So first, this kind of a quick review about this. How does VPA2, VPA3 enterprise work? What's the basic idea there? And we usually have their Wi-Fi controllers, Wi-Fi APs. We have the user devices. The APs communicate with the authenticating server via Radius protocol. And when we are talking about VPA2, VPA3 enterprise authentication, then we are talking also first, there is a Radius protocol there below everything, or there is UDP, IP, stuff like that below that. But there is Radius protocol, and on top of that, or inside the Radius protocol, is this EAP protocol, which is this kind of a authentication protocol. Not sure. Maybe the crew down there can help. Okay, thanks. No worries. So there are different protocols in EAP. There are this kind of EAP protocols where you have a TLS secured envelope there, and inside that goes this kind of identity like user credentials, username, password, certificate, and this can go there inside the TLS envelope or TLS protocol in plain text. There is also something older, MS-SAP-v2, challenge response protocols, and things like that. And they are usually in this EAP TTLS, EAP protocols used there. There are also other protocols like EAP TLS, EAP SIM, EAP aka Prime, and EAP PVD. And some of these latter ones are not tunnel protocols. The difference is that the protocol itself have the security features to kind of authenticate the whole thing or secure the transfer of credentials there, so they don't need tunneling around them. And this is basically how this kind of VPA2, VPA3 enterprise authentications work. But then some background about how does this kind of Wi-Fi Radius roaming work, and this is kind of hierarchical Radius model. So we do have this kind of centralized server there, and it knows where to route every realm, and realm means the domain that is there in the username. And this is how the whole actual EduRoam and the roaming architectures work, how they can kind of figure out where to get the username and the identity. It's based on this, that in the outer identity, so the outer envelope of EAP, there is the this kind of some kind of username. It can be anonymous username with some domain, which is called in Radius speak realm. And when this kind of a device is visiting some network, it tries to authenticate, it tries to join the network. If there is an eduroam network somewhere, every device that has an eduroam configuration profile tries to join that. And it tries to send the request there. And how it should go is that this Wi-Fi AP or Wi-Fi controller then sends it to the local Radius server. Because the local Radius server kind of figures out that, I don't know, for example, example.com, it sends it to the default route that is the kind of usually the top-level Radius server here. And the top-level Radius server then decides that, okay, I know where example.com is authenticated and sends it to there. And this is kind of a hop-by-hop Radius UDP transport there. But what happens here is that the roaming visitor's device and the home organization server, if these are properly configured, they kind of create this kind of a secured EAP tunnel secured by the TLS, verified by the TLS certificates, so that the intermediate points in this kind of roaming hierarchy, these cannot kind of see that what's there in the inner envelope. They just see, for example, anonymous at example.com, and they just transfer the Radius request to the home organization server, and the home organization server then responds OK or reject for the roaming user. And based on that, the user is kind of granted access to the visited organization's Wi-Fi network. This kind of hierarchical Radius roaming federation, there the kind of links between these servers. So we have these kind of universities, we may have companies, other organizations. They may utilize something like Radius over TLS, RADSEC, or Radius over IPsec. In operator roaming, when we are talking about Wi-Fi offloading and these kind of operator things, usually there has been Radius over IPsec, and in this kind of other roaming federations, as open roaming, there is Radius over TLS. These have been used in eduroam as well, but usually, because we have there in the EAP protocol, we have the TLS wrapped around it. Usually it's thought that, okay, this plain Radius authentication and accounting, that's completely fine. It works there. The inner identity stays secure. Of course, there are some other things in the Radius request that come later in the presentation that you can check from the request that kind of can reveal something about the user. So it's not really kind of fully anonymous things there. Then this is the kind of a later kind of a peer-to-peer Radius roaming federation. This originally was tried already in eduroam, and it was kind of a let's say, adopted in the industry in this kind of open roaming federation. How this is different from the eduroam is that, like I said, in eduroam, it's mostly so that all devices connect to the networks that are named eduroam. But in this particular case, there are some other passpoint networks for Wi-Fi offloading. There are these open roaming networks. The SSID, the network name of the Wi-Fi network, can be anything. How the devices figure out that they want to connect to it is based on the roaming consortium organization ID, ARCOI. And that means that the devices kind of figure out from the Wi-Fi beacon messages that, yeah, I see now this ARCOI, this is something that I have a profile for, I will try to join this network. And this way, the user may not even know the Wi-Fi network name he or she is connecting to. It may be something that just exists there, looks like a VPA2, VPA through enterprise network, but your device may have then a profile that makes your device connect to that. This peer-to-peer radius roaming network, it also has some other things that are kind of newer there. There is a DNS discovery for finding out that this is like you have an email system, and if you know how emails work, they checked from the DNS that where should I send this domain's email. Well, basically same thing, DNS discovery. We are using NAPTR and serve records in DNS, and every time there is a visiting user in the network, the radius server in that network asks that where should I send this domain user authentication. And then it gets this response from the global DNS and builds this kind of dynamic TLS secure tunnel to the user's home organization. And this tunnel is then secured by the Roaming Federation PKI issued certificate. So dynamic radius over TLS over TCP connection, and it's authenticated by Roaming Federation PKI certificates. Right, so now the basics were there. Let's go into the actual security things. So most of these, let's say, attacks here, most of these are available if you want to do them locally as well. You can do evil twin mitten attack already, but the difference now is that because the user device may be provisioned by the operator, it may have some additional Wi-Fi profiles that are not controlled by the user. They are coming with, for example, for iPhone or perhaps even with Google Android, they may come from the operator in the operator configuration packages or carrier configuration packages. And in them, there might be this roaming consortium organization IDs there in those packages that the device will automatically try to join. And that makes it possible for somebody to set up completely innocent-looking SSID advertising in the same beacon messages, also roaming consortium organization IDs. And that means that the user may not even know that, his or her device is actually trying to connect this network. It's just their device tries to connect to that, but these attackers, they don't need even to pass the traffic there, because nowadays the devices kind of just decide that, I couldn't authenticate to that. I don't send the traffic through that, but the attacker may have already gained some information about the user, something like MAC addresses that don't actually change with the network profiles there, even if randomized MAC addresses are used. And I will come back to that later. But this attack is kind of the similar way, like in this kind of local attack. This is a kind of a different twist to that attack there. And of course, the kind of mitigation things for these are the proper Wi-Fi configuration profiles, then using private CA signed radius certificate instead of well-known or system CA Android signed one. The idea there is that the only thing how this kind of roaming networks are verified is that does your authentication work with the profile you have to the home organization. There isn't an AP verification anywhere. It's just that does my authentication work to the home organization with the profile I have? If you do the profile manually and kind of make mistakes there, you don't check, for example, the radius server certificate here, which is the home organization radius server, or you don't check the name of the certificate there. Well, there could be a man in the middle there gaining access to the credentials you are sending there. Using private CA science radius certificate with the configuration profiles, that means that you cannot do that kind of thing that you will just take another DigiCert global root CA science certificate and then try to get the user to authenticate against that one. If you use private CA science certificate and the profile, then it kind of narrows down the attack surface there. Then, of course, are those authentication methods that don't send any credentials over the EAP protocol. And EAP TLS, client certificate authentication, and EAP PVD are such ones. Something you can do locally is, of course, the rogue access point detection and isolation features that are available in Wi-Fi controllers, so that the Wi-Fi controllers may, for example, try to disconnect every user connecting to the same SSID if that AP is not part of that organization. But this is not, I don't think this is configured or usually in those networks, because it kind of makes things difficult if you, for example, share networks with some other organizations. And of course, this kind of policy things, using separate network credentials for Wi-Fi authentication means that, okay, if your credentials go there, it's just Wi-Fi network, but if you use your AD credentials, well, there goes your AD credentials. Then there is a remote brute force denial of service attack. So you can do also this locally, of course. You will just go to some organization and start hammering their network, their user accounts. You, for example, buy some email spam list and check that what email addresses are there and try to guess passwords against them. And usually what happens there is that the Active Directory or the authentication backend closes the user account because too many wrong password attempts. And this is the way to kind of make some kind of denial of service attack, or you can of course try remote brute force as well, or brute force guessing the passwords there against this kind of list. But basically this kind of relies on that usually organizations, they don't bother kind of, there is an option that they don't kind of configure any kind of locking to their AD. Or then there is an option that they configure the locking to their AD, and if something like this happens accidentally or by attacker, then that user account is locked. And this can happen also accidentally when you have, for example, users that keep the old usernames and passwords in their devices, and then your organization has a policy of changing passwords every 6 months or 9 months. And those devices try to authenticate against the Active Directory and kind of close the user account because they have the wrong old password for them. How this is related to roaming network security, you can now do it so that you don't have to be in range for the Wi-Fi network. You can do this remotely wherever the roaming federation is. So you can do this from some other country, from some other city, and target that against some organization. Of course, somebody would say that rate limiting is then perhaps the solution, but this isn't so simple to implement there. You could do rate limiting setup perhaps in the home organization, because you can kind of guess that how many roaming users do you have. But in somewhere there in between, you cannot kind of figure out that, well, what's the amount of traffic that is going to one organization. And then there are, of course, this kind of wrong password thing still there. So basically, this kind of rate limiting very easily can contribute something like to the denial of service attack or something like that, and it adds complexity to the whole authentication infrastructure. And usually what I have learned that what organizations have done, they have kind of rarely started doing rate limiting. because this they have figured out that, yeah, this hasn't really happened so much that they have decided to use that. All right. Then something a bit different. Most of you, I probably know and remember the Log4j. But this is kind of different vector for the whole thing, so that when we are doing roaming networks, or we could do this also locally, we have the kind of possibility to send some information into the organization's authentication infrastructure. With roaming hierarchy, the authentication infrastructure is far larger there. With the local organization, it's the first radius and all the log processing, Wi-Fi controllers and network devices showing the information that the user is authenticating to. So if we, for example, insert this kind of exploit, whatever there, to the inner identity or password, or the outer identity is actually better, because then you can kind of try to figure out something from the whole infrastructure, from the visited organization to the home organization. And the idea there is that we have this, at least the outer identity, which is the username of the user. Then if we want to target the end organization, that's the inner identity there. And then there is a password that can be sent to the home organization, of course. And the idea is that what if the Log4j or any other, let's say, something like easier HTML, CSS exploit would be put into the outer identity there, and it goes through logging system, it goes through Wi-Fi controllers, it goes through their web user interfaces that the root users or admin users are using. So if the exploit is put there, it can be displayed by the user interfaces if they are not sanitized properly there. And in some cases, it might be possible to then gain some nice administrator credentials there. This works in range, out of range, and this way it may affect services that are not considered part of the authentication process. Luckily, there have not been successful public cases or occurrences of this attack that I know. In EruRoam, this was actually tested and figured out that, yeah, maybe we should kind of just send this through the whole hierarchy there, just placing some kind of easy Log4j exploit there. But that didn't give kind of any results for that. So it seems that most of the this kind of log processing services and so on were kind of sanitizing their inputs there as well. Then some limit of the exploit is, of course, the radius attribute length, that is 253 characters, and that limits the exploits. The mitigation is, of course, sanitizing inputs in the software, so sanitizing username, outer identity, inner identity, password in radius servers. This, of course, kind of works there, but it's kind of same thing that if you want to figure out that what is actually a valid email address, you need to be kind of careful in that yeah, is there a kind of a really good regular expression for that, or are you actually breaking some legit request with it? And I already talked about the inner identity and password, of course, because it goes through the tunnel. It's only affecting the home organization there. Right. Okay, then some fun with radius attributes. This is hard to kind of, let's say, utilize or abuse locally. This requires that you have this kind of a radius server there, part of the roaming hierarchy. And the idea here is that in VPA2, VPA3 Enterprise, the NAS device, the Wi-Fi controller, the AP, it follows what its local radius is responding to it based on the user authentication there. So in some cases, some organizations utilize VPA2, VPA3 Enterprise, for example, so that home organization users are put into the home organization virtual LAN, and then these kind of guest users are put into another virtual LAN. And they are given this kind of configuration directives by the local radius server here. But when you connect that to roaming hierarchy, then you can get those radius attributes as a part of the radius OK or radius reject request coming from some other organization radius server. And that means that these attackers' radius servers could just kind of try to give different instructions to this visited organization Wi-Fi controller. And if there isn't any filtering done, here, for example, in this especially in the home organization radius, it means that this device could then just figure out that, yeah, okay, I will put this user to this VLAN 42. Well, that's actually the company's employee VLAN there. So in a way, these could inject into response this kind of different VLANs and even try to go through the whole VLAN ID space there to figure out that if the attacker devices get some kind of nice access with different VLAN IDs, so it could be kind of hopping between different VLANs there without the visited organization radius or the controller doing anything for it. And that can be done by standard attributes. There are standard attributes for VLAN assignment, and of course, those can be filtered out. So you can filter out the standard attributes. Some of them are done actually in the Federation radius servers already. But then the fun thing is that if you have enterprise Wi-Fi hardware, you also have vendor-specific radius attributes that are those radius attributes defined by the vendor that, for example, this visited organization may be using. And those are not kind of really filtered because there is a lot of vendors and there can be a lot of vendor attributes. Those are not really kind of filtered by any other than the organization itself. So the organization itself needs to secure and strip those standard and vendor-specific attributes. If it knows that we are using Cisco, we are Aruba House, we are using Ubiquiti, we need to strip these attributes there. Otherwise, from roaming authentication, you could get this kind of attributes that instruct your network devices do something that you don't want to do. And because this requires that the roaming organization has this kind of attacker's radius server as a part of it, it needs to be taken extra care what organization can join the roaming federation and of course in identifying those organizations. This gets harder when we go to this kind of peer-to-peer roaming hierarchies because you really don't know anymore everybody there and you just need to kind of rely the rules of the, let's say, the roaming federation or that roaming federations, this kind of a validation process there. All right. Then this is a I have to admit, this is a bit theoretical thing. This is a kind of a thing that I wanted to add to this presentation because it illustrates something about this whole roaming hierarchy and about the EAP protocol. When we send the EAP authentication through the hierarchy, usually only the decisions for OK or no are logged in the radius server. So if there is, for example, an EAP discussion with the attacker's Radius server here, and it never reaches this kind of end there, so it never kind of gets accept or reject, you can just send data throughout the whole roaming hierarchy to the your, let's say, Radius server that is under your control there. You need a modified VPA supplicant to do this, and you need a modified Radius server, but it's completely possible to utilize the whole roaming hierarchies to transfer this way information through them without authenticating, without ever accessing the network there. Like I said, this is a highly theoretical thing. It is unknown if roaming federations have ever been used this, but we kind of don't know. This could hide very easily in the noise of the normal authentication, and because this kind of incomplete authentication processes, they are not logged in the roaming hierarchy, they are logged in the home server there. We really don't know that if this is used or could be used, and there are so many kind of failed authentications in roaming networks that, yeah, really you can't kind of figure out this easily from the logs. Of course, this requires the attacker organization to be part of the roaming federation, but then if we think about this, the technical prevention may not be feasible at all. And maybe the most efficient mitigation is this, that, yeah, maybe you should take more care that who are joining the roaming federation and how you are identifying them. All right? That's about the Wi-Fi roaming security. Then let's go a bit to the Wi-Fi roaming privacy part next. All right. So MAC address randomization, we all have it. Does it really work? In most devices, the randomized MAC address, it only changes when a network or profile is deleted and created again. So if you have those operator profiles, or you kind of first join to one network, maybe it's something like mall is having its kind of guest network there, your MAC address really doesn't change there ever before you kind of delete the profile, create it again. It's same with the roaming profiles. It creates the randomized MAC address the first time you create the profile, and then it keeps it the same. And if we are doing this kind of authenticated, we are doing this kind of roaming networks, MAC address doesn't really matter, because you may have in your outer identity, in the username, your identity that is put there by your device or your profile there. Also, your home organization may return in their kind of authentication reply the chargeable user identity that kind of also describes that this is that user. And these are sent because Radius protocol is a plain text protocol. It's basically sent in plain text there, because it's in the outer identity, for example. There are some kind of new developments like EAP-TLS, when it uses TLS 1.3, and you have the possibility in EAP-TLS, for example, add that anonymous at organization there to get a bit more privacy there. In EAP-SIM, EAP-AKA Prime, these are authentication methods used for Wi-Fi networks so that your mobile device can authenticate through your SIM identity there. But in these cases, most of these with the first connection send your IMSI there in the first connection. They may use then temporary IMSI, but only this kind of IMSI privacy protection is the kind of thing, modern standard that kind of protects so that even in the first authentication, your kind of IMSI is protected there so that the visited organization or anyone in the between does not get that. And like I said, outer identity, radius attributes, and especially radius accounting. That is sent in clear text if there is if there are no the IPsec or RADSEC tunnels between the operators to kind of secure the traffic there. And this is the kind of example, just for some information. There can be a lot of different attributes. This is a radius accounting request, a start request. This is from a device that did a SIM authentication. So we get there the username. We get vendor-specific attributes, like for example, Aruba SSID, Aruba location, Aruba user VLAN, Aruba rule, Aruba device type. And by the way, there you can actually notice with the Aruba user VLAN that this accounting request actually tells your roaming partners and other organizations which VLAN in your organization this roaming user is using. Some of the controllers and APs also now have a feature of trying to identify the actual mobile device. So they can tell in the accounting request that if they think this is a Mac device, this is a Windows device, this is an iPhone, this is an Android phone, and all this. And that is collected by the DHCP 802.1x supplicant, HTTP user, again, different ways, because this is a business for companies, some tracking services and so on. So they want to kind of get information who is using your network, and they are sending that in radius requests if the requests are not filtered there. Then there is a radius accounting stop message. There are some of the same requests there. Note that it's possible to also send location information about you, where you are using. If the visited organization network operator has configured, for example, that this AP is in this address or even GPS coordinates, this information can be sent, if not filtered, in every accounting request Wi-Fi controller sends there. There is also this kind of new technology under standardization called Wi-Fi sensing. And that is kind of interesting in the sense that if you haven't checked it out, you can Google it, check what it means. But basically, you probably know the Batman Dark Knight movie there, where the Batman puts out this kind of setup where he uses microphones and speakers in mobile phones to create this kind of radar-like images or LiDAR-like images. Well, Wi-Fi sensing is basically so that they utilize the Wi-Fi access point signals, the Wi-Fi signal attenuation, and the kind of differences what happen in the Wi-Fi signals to figure out, for example, how many persons there are in a room and where they are moving in that room. And this kind of information is probably sent, in any case, over something like a radius protocol. And if it's sent over a plain text, it kind of starts really matter that what is the, let's say, the extent that is where it is sent and where it is received and who is there in between. So is it a kind of short management network, or is it something like a global roaming hierarchy that information is sent? How these attributes are then secured and transferred, that remains to be seen. Then your device in this kind of roaming networks, it may do things you do not know. I think I went through most of this there, but like I said, your device may have this kind of roaming network profiles that make your device try to connect any network, advertising suitable network name, roaming consortium organization ID, realm, and even when it tries to kind of authenticate, it gives some information to somebody who is listening to that. And in Finland, we don't have a lot of this kind of Wi-Fi offloading which means that operators try to get the data traffic to go over their partner or their own Wi-Fi network instead of 4G or 5G to save costs. But for example, in the US or in Asia, because there is a far more people there, far more subscribers, they are using this Wi-Fi off roaming to kind of get those cost of running 4G and 5G networks down there and get the users to kind of update their apps through the Wi-Fi that is closer to them. And then when you kind of get the setup, you get your mobile phone subscription, you get those operator profiles that are not actually visible or manageable by you. And this everything, if there is a then, this is of course available for the operator there, all the information is available for them. But then if you are an attacker, because the network name or the roaming consortium organization ID or the roaming realms, they are not verified by any way by the protocol that, yeah, this is a kind of real network advertisement. It's possible for somebody to just set up a Wi-Fi AP that never lets you in. It just collects the information, for example, from everyone in this room that, okay, what devices are there, are they trying to connect, what networks and so on. And you can get this kind of information about the users in any case. A bit about the SIM privacy. Like I said, in most of these SIM authentication protocols, the IMSI goes there in the first authentication in the clear. It then can change to temporary IMSI, but also that can be, of course, used by tracking. And only this kind of IMSI privacy protection protects the identity already during first authentication. There is an example that the Apple started actually now warning that, yeah, you are actually sending information when you are doing this authentication to this network. So what can you do to protect your, let's say, privacy? Well, you can use MAC address randomization. It at least makes the tracking harder. Then if you are not using it, this kind of anonymous user identity in Wi-Fi configurations, if you are using your school credentials or something like that, using this kind of anonymous outer identity is kind of better idea. In eduroam, you can use eduroam cat, and if your organization has done it properly, they have put there the anonymous identity there in the outer identity. Then if you are an operator or this kind of organization, a roaming federation, if it's not required, why send this information through the roaming hierarchy? Don't send it. That's an eduroam recommendation for radius accounting. You can also protect the traffic using RADSEC, radius over TLS, using IPsec, that kind of things, to protect so that there can't be anyone in between at least to check that what's going there. Then using the modern protocols with TLS version 1.3, because the earlier EAP TLS, it took from the client certificate, it took the CN or subject alt name from the certificate, and it put that into outer identity. And with TLS version 1.3, you can protect that client certificate contents that otherwise was sent in plain text over the network there. And then for the SIM authentication, if you're an operator, this IMSI privacy protection is something that is supported by Android and iPhone. And it needs, of course, to be supported by the Radius server. And the idea there is that at least those devices, iPhones or Androids, don't complain anymore that they are sending that in plain text. And then some links. I will make these slides public. and I have given already permission to release also this presentation as a public one. There is a radius extension group in IETF that focuses in improving the radius features here. So there are DTLS, TLS encryption additions. There are deprecation of insecure practices in radius, mainly this kind of plain text communication, MD5, ZAP, that kind of thing. There are kind of additional TLS PSK, which means that you don't need to use certificates to get this kind of radius over TLS tunnels maybe anymore in the future, so it makes that more simple. And then, of course, because there is a lot of different changes, a lot of different updates, there needs to be some kind of negotiation for what features are supported. And that's radius ALPN and removing MD5 draft. But thanks. That was kind of a very, let's say, quick run to the Wi-Fi roaming security and privacy there. And if you have any questions, I think we have still 3 minutes there left, or I will be here for the whole event. So if you want to kind of discuss something of this, just come and talk to me so we can kind of discuss that in detail if you want to.